Alright, so here's what we know right now about Operation Midnight Hammer, which was the record-setting US airstrike that hit several of Iran's nuclear facilities with bombs that had never been used in combat before. You'll notice that this video is a little bit different than the ones that we've done before because given the nature of the news and how rapidly everything is evolving, we wanted to get this out as soon as possible. So I started writing the script on Monday, June 23rd, and recording it on Tuesday, the 24th, and hoping to post it by Thursday, the 26th. I'm not using a green screen. This won't really be heavy in B-roll or animations. I'm standing up, obviously, and this isn't going to be as scripted as usual, so forgive me if I misspeak or otherwise make a fool of myself, which honestly by now just kind of assume that's going to happen. Alright, let's get going. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. If you're still juggling spreadsheets, sticky notes, and 6 different software platforms just to keep your business running, stop. There's a better way. Odoo is a fully integrated business management system built to handle everything from the sales floor to the shop floor. Let's start with inventory. Odoo's inventory dashboard gives you instant clarity, receipts, delivery orders, point of sale transactions, you name it. You'll know what's in, what's out, what's late, and what's back ordered all at a glance. You can automate vendor reminders, set deliveries, and pay for receipts in just a few clicks. Whether you run a garage startup or a multi-warehouse operation, Odoo helps you move faster and smarter. And when it comes to manufacturing, Odoo's dashboard puts your whole production line on one screen. Track work orders, monitor assembly stations, and keep an eye on load times. Use the mobile barcode app to scan components in real time, cutting down on delays and input errors without ever touching a keyboard. Need to tweak your bill of materials or reference a worksheet? It's all built in and it's all synced. And here's the kicker, it all works together. Sales, e-commerce, CRM, inventory, manufacturing is not just integrated, it's seamless. So if you're ready to stop duct taping your business systems together, head to odoo.com and get your first app totally free. No credit card, no trial period, just powerful tools free for life. You've got enough to manage, let Odoo handle the rest. This is the kind of operation that's been talked about for a while now, with, Pentagon planners having folders covered in dust on their desks for years and just waiting, maybe wishing for an opportunity to put it into practice. But now they have. It's happened. B-2 stealth bombers with a 6,000-mile range flew thousands of miles, synced up with about 125 aircraft, hit targets in Iran with a reported 75 precision munitions, and got out before a single shot could be fired at them, allegedly. Midnight Hammer was launched at 0001, which is pretty much midnight, on June 21st, 2025, with 7 B-52 bombers taking off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They started heading east, where they were met by dozens of aerial tankers staged along the more than 13,000-kilometer route. By 1700 Eastern Time, the B-2s linked up with the support package in the CENTCOM area of operations that consisted of F-35s, F-22s, 4th generation fighters, and ISR aircraft. At the same time, an Ohio-class submarine in the Gulf of Oman launched 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles. At 1800, the B-2s and the support package, all those aircraft I mentioned, arrived in Iranian airspace, and between 1840 and 1900, the B-2s and the Tomahawks converged on their targets inside of that 20-minute window. By 1930, the B-2s and supporting aircraft were cleared of Iranian airspace, and the Spirits began their long flight back home to Missouri. We should briefly discuss the deception effort involving B-2s to keep the attack a surprise. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told reporters that the B-2s were sent west to the Pacific as a decoy, and with Iran looking at those aircraft, the 7 B-2s took off from Whiteman and flew east. This wasn't just done to keep the B-2s safe, but also those 100 other plus aircraft that were involved. According to defense officials and President Trump's own Truth Social post, there were 3 primary targets. First up, we have the nuclear facility at Isfahan, located about 300 miles south of Tehran. This was built in 1984 with Chinese assistance, And according to the Nuclear Threat Initiative, 3,000 scientists were employed here, and it is thought to be the center of Iran's nuclear weapons program. It has 3 Chinese-supplied reactors, a conversion facility that takes uranium ore concentrate, sometimes called yellow cake, and turns it into uranium hexafluoride gas. It also has a zirconium cladding facility used to make zirconium alloy tubes for nuclear fuel rods. It has a fuel production plant, and a lot more that can be used for peaceful purposes, but also to make a weapon. In 2022, Iran announced plans that are probably on hold to build another reactor at the site. Next, we have Natanz, located about 250 kilometers south of Tehran. This is the largest uranium enrichment facility in the country and was revealed in 2002, with Iran confirming its existence in 2003. At its heart is an underground enrichment facility with gas centrifuges about 50 meters underground and surrounded by 25 meters of concrete. There are 2 other underground buildings, a fuel enrichment plant and pilot fuel enrichment plants. Above ground, there were also several long buildings used to assemble gas centrifuge assemblies. Lastly, and most notably, we have Fordow, which is about 170 miles south of Tehran. This facility is almost entirely underground, with estimates putting it at 80 to 90 meters deep, under a mountain that consists mostly of limestone and dolomite, which is pretty hard, and that's an important consideration when you're dropping bunker busters. Nobody besides Iran really knows how long this has been in operation, but Tehran claims construction started in 2007. It wasn't publicly acknowledged though until 2009. It contains centrifuge cascades, at least 8, that contain 3,000 centrifuges each. The IAEA has said that Iran has not enriched uranium there since November of 2013 though. Now this is also where it kind of gets messy, because Iran says that Fordow is for civilian and peaceful purposes, but the US and others naturally wonder why they'd need to bury that 90 meters under a mountain and keep it a secret. Regardless, it likely isn't going to be doing much of anything for a while now. We don't know all the munitions used outside of the Tomahawks launched from a submarine, and of course the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP, which is the star of this show. Satellite imagery from Maxar, taken a few days before the strikes and then shortly after, gives us a good idea of what kind of damage occurred though. The MOPs, as we said before, had never been used operationally, and they can only be delivered by the B-2. In this strike, each B-2 delivered 2 of the 30,000-pound bombs engineered to penetrate an estimated 60 meters underground. Officials also mentioned high-speed suppression weapons without specifying what those actually were. We can speculate that these are anti-radiation missiles, also called like HARM missiles. There's a bunch of acronyms for them. Anyways, they hone in on radars that are part of surface-to-air missile batteries, and using these, combined with electronic warfare suites on aircraft like the E-18G Growler and F-35, that makes it so that aircraft can operate relatively safely in the airspace, because as soon as they turn these radars on, they're spotted, and then the missiles kind of just, use their own radar signature to find them. It's kind of a bad thing if you're operating these SAM sites, but a great thing if you're in the sky. Here at Natanz, we can see a hole in the center and some possible cratering. Now, compared to before, shown here, it is apparent that significant damage occurred. The before and after at Fordow, though, isn't as illuminating, but here it is before, with no holes in the ground and no ash surrounding any impact areas, and then here it is after, with what looks like 6 holes tightly grouped. This likely indicates that they stacked the MOPs to penetrate deeper, kind of like you got a drill and you drill a little bit and you pull it out and you drill a little bit more. Same principle, but with a 30,000-pound bomb dropped from God knows how high up, that does significant damage. We can also see in the close-up satellite image that the entrances to the complex are blocked with dirt, which they were apparently filled in by Iran to prevent an Israeli commando raid. At Isfahan, where everything is mostly above ground, the 30 Tomahawks did their damage, taking out multiple buildings. In the before, we can see some damage caused by earlier Israeli strikes, but most of the buildings are still intact. The post-US strike imagery, though, shows several buildings no longer standing, just black marks on the landscape. The IAEA estimates that significant damage occurred at all the sites and noted that even if the MOPS failed to breach the complex at Fordow, the centrifuges, which are incredibly sensitive, could have been severely damaged from the shocks. US language around the strikes is a little more definite, with President Trump saying in only the way he can that the facilities were completely and totally obliterated. Iranian officials have said, however, that Fordow has not suffered any irreversible damage. Now, technically speaking, they're probably right, because even if something was destroyed, like the tunnels, they could rebuild it, and, if they don't have a regime change, they might. They might. I don't know. Iran has also said that it had moved nuclear and other essential materials away from the sites before the US attack. Alright, right now though, let's talk real quick about that nuclear material. Experts assert that Iran has achieved 60% uranium enrichment. Natural uranium is at about 0.7%, and to be used for nuclear power, you only need 3 to 5%. So, at 60%, any nuclear weapon produced would be crude, but still dangerous. But to achieve fully weapons grade, they'd need to get to 90%. Now that sounds like a lot, but this can be done in weeks as opposed to months. The IAEA reported on May 17th that Iran had 408.6 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, and they'd only need about 25 kilograms to make a weapon. This seems in large part why Israel and now the US went in so hard and made it such a big deal. All that said, don't expect Iran to immediately show us a smoking crater at Natanz. These sites are hardened, protected, and the Iranian government is already trying to control the narrative. But US intelligence believes that these strikes were successful, at least tactically. Iran's response, which was apparently telegraphed to both the United States and Qatar, or Qatar, I genuinely don't know how to pronounce that, was pretty mild, all things considered. On Monday, June 23rd, they launched ballistic missiles toward Al Udeid, I'm sorry if I screwed that up, whatever, air base in Qatar. Footage reportedly from the ground shows interceptors taking out the missiles, with US defense officials saying there were no injuries to US personnel. Iran claimed it launched missiles at US troops in Iraq, but that hasn't been confirmed. Noticeably absent through all of this, even through Israel strikes, have been Iran's proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen. Iran relied heavily on these groups to put pressure on its enemies in the past, with instances of militia groups controlled by Iran targeting US troops in Iraq and Syria, and Hezbollah and Hamas launching missiles and drones into Israel. It's also worth noting that the Houthis in Yemen haven't been targeting shipping lanes either. Not really sure why, but it's something to keep in mind. This is likely due to years-long campaigns to dismantle the groups and Israel killing several key leaders in Iran in the opening hours of Operation Rising Lion, including the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commander, Major General Hossein Salami, and Major General Mohammad Bagheri, who was the Chief of Staff of Iran's armed forces. Reactions from around the world were mixed. Israel is obviously supportive, especially because now they don't have to go into Fordow on the ground in what would likely be a costly operation that would certainly escalate further. European allies, on the other hand, are worried about escalation and the collapse of what little is left of the Iran nuclear deal that was brokered in 2015, but the US withdrew from in 2016 during Trump's first term. Russia and China condemned the strike and are already using it to push anti-US narratives, but they were obviously not going to support this. So now the big question, did Operation Midnight Hammer actually succeed? Militarily, yes, at least in the short term. B-2s got in and out, Iran's enrichment capability took a huge hit, and there were no reported US casualties, so that's a pretty good outcome objectively. But strategically, that's where things get a little bit murkier. Iran's nuclear scientists are still alive, though they've lost a lot of them to Israeli strikes. Underground sites can be rebuilt, some are even believed to be deeper than what current bunker busters can reach, and Iran likely still has those 400 plus kilograms of enriched uranium stashed away somewhere. The big win, at least in my opinion, is the message that this sends. We sent 7 stealth bombers that flew halfway around the world without stopping, that linked up with 100 plus other aircraft to drop massive bombs on heavily defended nuclear sites that up until recently were all but impenetrable, and there was not a single thing that Iran could do to stop it. No other country has this capability, and we did it using a plane that has been in service since 1997 and that already has a replacement flying in the B-21 Reaper. I mean, that's just truly remarkable the more you think about it. We do have to consider some things though, because there is concern that despite statements from Trump and a shaky ceasefire between Israel and Iran, which as I record this right now at 1:40 on Tuesday, the 24th, seems to have already fallen apart, and it's not even 24 hours old. But anyways, there's concerns that this could devolve into a wider regional and possibly global conflict. That doesn't appear likely today, even with the ceasefire breaking down, but Iran is pretty resilient, and who knows how or where they're going to bounce back. While their initial response wasn't huge, officials are now warning of possible retaliation inside of the United States. According to the Wall Street Journal, FBI officials are moving resources around to focus on Iran and domestic threats that they could present. They also report that 11 Iranian nationals were arrested just last weekend on immigration violations, with one that was picked up in St. Paul, Minnesota, who allegedly has ties to Hezbollah, and a man arrested in Alabama that was allegedly a former sniper in Iran's military. There is also the ever-present threat of cyber attacks, which can be pulled off with relatively little risk, but can bring significant damage. Iranian threat actors, or hackers, however you want to say it, are capable and have breached US infrastructure before, with one attack just a couple years ago getting into Unitronics PLC devices that are used in critical infrastructure. That's where the real threat comes from, that all these devices, if they can get into it, kind of like how we did with, Sandworm, when we screwed with their centrifuges in Iran by adjusting the PLC coding so that the centrifuges would spin just a little bit faster and wear them down by, I think it was like an extra 25%. Anyways, if they get into these PLC devices, they can turn them off, turn them on, flood places out, pull power from places, lock people out from being able to take control of them. It's generally not a good thing, but it's something that, they're pretty good at and they're comfortable with doing. So anyways, we'll keep tracking this story as it unfolds, and if there is another aspect of the strike or the fallout, like what Iran could do in the US to retaliate or something like that, let us know in the comments. And if you like this format, let us know about that too. And also if you don't like this format, let us know. But who knows, maybe this will work a little bit better for everybody involved. All right, so I wrote this script, Savvy edited the video, and once again, I am your friendly ginger newsman. You are all dismissed, and we will see you next time.